Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we are going to discuss embolism. An embolus, this is a detached intravascular solid, liquid or gaseous mass carried by blood from its point of origin to a distant site, where this can cause some tissue dysfunction or infarction. So embolus may be a solid, this may be a liquid or gaseous mass. We have discussed in thrombus formation, most of these emboli, these will originate from the thrombi. A part of the thrombus is detached, this will travel through the blood and this will block the circulation at some distant area. So this mechanism, this phenomena is known as thromboembolism. Thromboembolism, how this occurs? Due to dislodged thrombus. This thrombus may be from different origins, maybe from fat droplets, maybe some gas bubbles, maybe some atherosclerotic debris from some atheroma. These are cholesterol emboli, because most major thing in the atheroma, that is the deposition of cholesterol crystals. Tumor fragments, a part of a tumor may be dislodged and this can serve as an embolus. Bone marrow fragments or foreign bodies. Sometimes some parasite may be acting as foreign body. So any of these things, when these are traveling through the circulation and then they block the circulation at some point, maybe completely or partially. So this phenomenon is known as thromboembolism. If this will block the circulation completely or most of this circulation is blocked, this can result in ischemic necrosis of the downstream tissue and that area may be infarcted. This can result in infarction. Now there are different types of embolism. Most important, that is the pulmonary embolism. There may be systemic thromboembolism, fat and bone marrow embolism, air embolism, amniotic fluid embolism. So we will be discussing these in bit detail. Pulmonary embolism. This is the most common form of thromboembolic disease. Most of these cases, 95% of the cases, they will originate from the deep veins of the leg, DVT. Now, in hospitalized patient, this is a very serious, very common clinical complication. We have no data from our country. Pulmonary embolism has had a fairly stable incidence since 1970s of roughly 2 to 4 per 1,000 hospitalized patients in US. So if this is the incidence rate in US, we can imagine how much, maybe much more in Pakistan, like our country. 2 to 4 out of all the hospitalized patients. And there are different factors which will increase this incidence. If the age is more, a patient has surgery, or pregnant lady, all these, a patient has malignancy, so all these factors are going to increase this incidence. These patients have more chances, especially in obese patients, they have more chances to get this DVT and then thromboembolism. More than 95% of the cases usually originate from the DVT from the legs. So what will be the consequences? A part of the thrombus is dislodged now from the legs, from the inferior vena cava, superior vena cava, then to the right side of the heart, then this will be pushed to the lungs. Now this embolus is passing from smaller to larger and larger vessels till this reaches the heart, then this will be pushed to the lungs. Now the consequences will depend upon the size of that embolus. Most pulmonary emboli are clinically silent, 60 to 80%. These are smaller in size, these may be, patient may be unable to notice these even. And many times there are multiple emboli at one time. There may be a shower of emboli, or there may be a repeated attack of emboli. If these are smaller in size, may be very few clinical symptoms or even no clinical symptoms. These may be gone unnoticed, clinically silent. Another thing, if a patient has had one attack of pulmonary embolism, he is at a high risk for getting more attacks of this pulmonary embolism. Now this is one extreme. Small emboli, there is pulmonary embolism, but still there are no clinical symptoms. These may be clinically silent. On the other end of the extreme, this can result in sudden death, big embolus that can block the pulmonary circulation, so patient can collapse. There may be right heart failure, cor pulmonale or cardiovascular collapse, especially when this embolus obstructs the 60% or more of the pulmonary circulation. Now, in between, there may be some other consequences. Embolic obstruction of medium-sized arteries with subsequent vascular rupture. Medium-sized arteries are blocked, then there is a rupture of these vessels, then there is a hemorrhage into the lungs. Now result will be depending upon the area. If there is dual blood supply, the lungs are supplied by dual blood supply. Now maybe this supply is sufficient to prevent the infarction. We can see some hemorrhage in the lungs, but still patient can survive. Multiple emboli over time, and repeatedly there is this phenomena, thromboembolism. Small emboli are going to the lungs. These are being organized in the lung vasculature. These may cause pulmonary hypertension, and then there may be right ventricular failure. This may be one result. And sometimes there is big embolus from the right atrium, right ventricle. This is pushed to the lungs, and there is a picture in your book. You can see this, that this big embolus straddle the pulmonary artery bifurcation. Pulmonary artery is dividing into two, and this blocks this artery at two sides of the artery. Of course, this will block the major circulation and patient will collapse. Another possibility is paradoxical embolism. A venous embolus passes through an interatrial or interventricular defect. Patient has this problem, interatrial or interventricular defect. This embolus passes from the ventricle, for example, from the right ventricle to the left ventricle, from the right atrium to the left atrium. Now this will be passing to the systemic circulation. Then this gains access to the systemic arterial circulation, and then this can go anywhere in the systemic circulation. Now here in systemic circulation, this is passing from larger to smaller and smaller and smaller arteries. At one side this will block the artery, then there will be ischemic problem depending upon the site where this will block the artery. There are different factors we will be discussing. The consequences will depend upon the sensitivity of that organ also. Dual blood supply, the sensitivity of that organ for ischemia. Brain is the most sensitive organ. Now you can see this picture. This is from your book. Big embolus, that is straddle embolus. It is blocking two sides of the artery, bronchial artery at the bifurcation. Thromboembolism, how this occurs? Due to dislodged thrombus. This thrombus may be from different origins, maybe from fat droplets, maybe some gas bubbles, maybe some atherosclerotic debris from some atheroma. These are cholesterol emboli, because most major thing in the atheroma, that is the deposition of cholesterol crystals. Tumor fragments, a part of a tumor may be dislodged, and this can serve as an embolus. Bone marrow fragments or foreign bodies. Sometimes some parasite may be acting as foreign body. So any of these things, when these are traveling through the circulation and then they block the circulation at some point, maybe completely or partially, so this phenomenon is known as thromboembolism. If this will block the circulation completely or most of this circulation is blocked, this can result in ischemic necrosis of the downstream tissue and that area may be infarcted. This can result in infarction. Then fat and marrow embolism. Microscopic fat globules sometimes is associated in hematopoietic bone marrow. These can be seen in the pulmonary vasculature after fracture of long bones or rarely in the settings of soft tissue trauma and burns. What happens in these cases? Presumably, these injuries rupture the vascular sinusoids in the marrow or small venules, and then these allow the marrow or adipose tissue to herniate into the vascular space, and then this can travel to the lung. Fat and marrow emboli are very common incidental findings after vigorous cardiopulmonary resuscitation, but these are of no clinical consequence. Fat embolism occurs in some 90% of the individuals with severe skeletal injuries, but less than 10% of these patients may have some clinical problems. So many of the times fat emboli may be producing no clinical symptoms. Fat embolism syndrome, this is the term applied to the minority of patients who become symptomatic. We have discussed 90% individuals with serious skeletal injuries may be having this fat embolism, but only less than 10% can have clinical problems. So, these patients who have clinical problems, then we say this, they have fat embolism syndrome. This syndrome, this is characterized by pulmonary insufficiency, neurologic symptoms, anemia and thrombocytopenia. What will happen to these patients? There is sudden onset of tachypnea, dyspnea and tachycardia. Irritability and restlessness, these can progress to delirium or coma. Usually this happens after 1 to 3 days after injury. Why there is thrombocytopenia? So thrombocytopenia, probably this is due to platelet adhesion to fat globules and subsequent aggregation or splenic sequestration. These fat globules containing these platelets is aggregate and then they will be removed by the spleen. Similarly, anemia can result from similar red cell aggregation or hemolysis. What will be the result of this thrombocytopenia? We can see a diffuse erythritol rash, usually in 20 to 50% of these cases. This is due to a rapid drop in platelet count in these patients. So, petechial rash, this is typical finding in thrombocytopenia. Now, pathogenesis of this fat emboli syndrome, usually this involves both mechanical obstruction and biochemical injury, two different factors. Fat microemboli and this is red cell and platelet aggregates. These can occlude the pulmonary and cerebral microvasculature. So this is mechanical obstruction. Another factor, that is release of free fatty acids from the fat globules. These fat globules, free fatty acids, these will worsen the situation by causing local toxic injury to the endothelium. Then there is platelet activation and granulocyte recruitment. So all this will complete the vascular assault. This is increasing the problem. In these patients, the microscopic demonstration of fat microglobules, this requires specialized techniques like frozen section technique or some stain which we use for fat. Then we can see these fat globules. In this picture you can see this vessel wall containing some fragments from the bone marrow which contains, you can see nucleated cells and big fat, big empty spaces. These indicate the presence of fat globules. Then there is another type, air embolism. Gas bubbles within the circulation which can coalesce to form frothy masses. So these masses can obstruct the vascular flow and then these can cause visceral ischemic injury. How this can happen? For example, a very small volume of air trapped in the coronary artery during bypass surgery, or this can be introduced into the cerebral circulation by neurosurgery performed in the sitting position. So these can occlude the flow with dire consequences. So both these organs are very sensitive, brain and heart. So in these cases, very little quantity of air, these can result in very severe complications, severe consequences. In other cases, larger volume of air, generally more than 100 cc, this is necessary to produce some clinical effects in the pulmonary circulation. But still, this volume of air can be inadvertently introduced during obstetric or laparoscopic procedures, or as a consequence of chest wall injury. Now there is a specific form of gas embolism. This is known as decompression sickness. This occurs when some individuals, they experience sudden decreases in the atmospheric pressure. How this can happen? Scuba and deep sea divers, underwater construction workers, or individuals in unpressurized aircraft in rapid ascent are all at risk. When the deep sea divers or such workers, they come out, that means atmospheric pressure is reducing. Or if the aircraft, unpressurized aircraft, this is going up rapidly, again there is a falling atmospheric pressure. So the bubbles of air, they are coming out. When air is breathed at high pressure during a deep sea dive, increased amounts of gas, particularly nitrogen, these are dissolved in the blood and tissues. Now if these people, these divers, then ascend, ascending means depressurizes. That means atmospheric pressure is decreasing too rapidly. What will happen? The nitrogen will come out of the solution in the tissue and in the blood. This rapid formation of gas bubbles within the skeletal muscles and supporting tissue in and about the joints, this is responsible for a very painful condition that was known as the bends. Bends due to some specific posture of these patients. Now in the lungs, gas bubbles in the vasculature can cause edema, hemorrhage, focal atelectasis or emphysema, leading to a form of respiratory distress syndrome. This is called chokes. Another form of this air embolism, that is a chronic form of decompression sickness. This is known as caisson disease. Again, this name is given for the pressurized vessel used in bridge construction. Workers in these vessels suffer both acute and chronic forms of decompression sickness. In caisson disease, persistence of gas emboli in the skeletal system lead to multiple foci of ischemic necrosis. The more common sites are the femoral heads, head of the femur, tibia and humera. These are the common sites where the patient can get ischemic necrosis. Individuals affected by acute decompression sickness, these are treated by being placed in a chamber under sufficiently high pressure to force the gas bubbles back into the solution. Then subsequently a slow decompression permits the gradual resorption and exhalation of the gases, and this will prevent the obstructed bubbles from reforming, so there will be no tissue necrosis. Another form is amniotic fluid embolism. Amniotic fluid embolism is the fifth most common cause of maternal mortality worldwide. This accounts for roughly 10% of the maternal deaths in the United States and results in permanent neurologic deficit in as many as 85% of the survivors. So this is a very serious complication. Although the incidence rate is not so high, but if this happens in United States, we can imagine in countries like ours. Amniotic fluid embolism, this is an ominous complication of labor and the immediate postpartum period. Incidence rate may be low. For example, in US may be only 1 in 40,000 deliveries. But if this happens, the mortality rate is very high, even 80% in setup like in US. What happens to the patient? The onset is characterized by sudden severe dyspnea, cyanosis and shock. This is followed by neurologic impairment. This impairment may be ranging from headache to seizures and coma. If the patient survives the initial crisis, pulmonary edema typically develops, frequently accompanied by DIC. What is the pathogenesis? The underlying cause is the infusion of amniotic fluid or fetal tissue into the maternal circulation via a tear in the placental membranes or rupture of some uterine veins. If we do postmortem examination in these patients, we can see the presence of squamous cells shed from the fetal skin, or lanugo hair, fat from the vernix caseosa, or mucin derived from the fetal respiratory or gastrointestinal tract in the maternal pulmonary microvasculation. Other findings include marked pulmonary edema, diffuse alveolar damage, and the presence of fibrin thrombi in many vascular beds due to DIC. So this happens due to biochemical activation of the coagulation factors and components of the innate immune system by the substances in the amniotic fluid rather than by mechanical obstruction of the pulmonary vessels by amniotic debris. So these may be the complications in these patients. Amniotic fluid embolism. Thank you.